Unless you've willfully chosen to ignore it, you know that 2018 is election year in Kansas. This November, voters will choose winners for most statewide offices and select new terms for a majority of the state legislature. At the top of the Sunflower State ballot is the race for governor. From the Heartland, over the next 3 weeks, we'll be taking a look at the major candidates for the office. Our goal is not to influence the vote one way or the other, but to simply outline where the candidates say they stand on the issues.
This is a big year for Kansas. The stakes have never been so high, and the choices have never been so clear. We can either go backward and repeat the last 8 years of the brownback devastation, or we can elect a governor who will work like the devil to rebuild our state.
This week, we're profiling the Democratic gubernatorial nominee, State Senator Laura Kelly, who, along with the other two major candidates, made a plea for votes during the recent state fair debate. The Topeka resident has served in the state Senate for nearly 14 years. Her campaign website touts a reputation in the public sector that's in good standing, having been recognized as an outspoken advocate for public education, health care, and women's rights. Kelly supports abortion rights, an expansion of Medicaid, and would push for greater acceptance of medical marijuana.
I know from the work that I've done in the legislature the difference it can make in the lives of children with severe epilepsy, in people with long sustained chronic pain, and those who are elderly and in hospice. I will vote to legalize medical marijuana.
Every candidate promises an improved economy if elected. Kelly proposes a three-pronged approach she believes will accomplish this. The senator would push for more state tax dollars to be spent on public education, transportation infrastructure, and health care. She believes such government spending will induce the economy to grow. She says the best way to pay for it all still needs to be determined.
I will bring together experts on tax policy and the economy, and we will work to forge a path back to a stable, sustainable tax structure that works for the state of Kansas.
Kelly also wants Kansas to create a constitutional rainy day fund.
So that we are forced, the legislature is forced, I'm forced as governor to put money away so the next time we have a downturn, we've got money in the bank to take care of it and ride us through.
The Democratic candidate promotes herself as a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. However, she is calling for the reinstatement of state restrictions in order to carry a concealed handgun. Kelly says if elected, her administration would turn its attention to rural Kansas by promoting housing development, Main Street revitalization, and improved roads, hospitals, and schools.
Help them build on their assets so that they have the economic wherewithal to sustain their schools and their hospitals and their businesses.
Kelly isn't shy about her support for what are considered classic liberal themes. But she also claims to be the only candidate for governor able to work with Republicans to govern in Kansas. I encourage you to take a deeper look at her views by visiting her campaign website at laurakellyforkansas.com. Next week, from the Heartland, we'll present part 2 of our look at the Kansas governor's race as we profile the proposals of Republican Chris Kobach. Reporting for Great Plains Christian Radio, I'm Delvin Kinser. The race for Kansas governor is drawing national attention. Some might say like never before. The subject of the second of our candidate profiles for the office could be the reason why. He is Republican Party nominee Chris Kobach.
Kobach is just another professional politician.
For years, Kobach has been a lightning rod for controversy, primarily from the political left who despise his support for strengthening illegal immigration and voter registration laws. Now, as the GOP choice in November, Kobach draws the ire not only of Kansas Democrats, but some moderate members of his own party who fear his policy positions, which he confidently voiced in this month's State Fair debate.
You have seen my leadership style over the past 8 years. I keep my promises. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it.
Kobach's platform has a few basic pillars. Most of them center on providing tax relief to Kansas. He promises to reduce taxes on Kansas businesses and individuals. And he's calling for a 2% cap on tax assessments of property values. He reasons it as an immediate boost to Kansas' agricultural economy.
They have been priced out of their fields. Some farmers paying $60,000, $80,000 in property taxes alone. That has to stop. We have got to end these stealth tax hikes through appraisal increases. And we also don't need to reappraise every year. Let's reappraise every 2 or 3 years like other states do.
The Republican disagrees with recent state Supreme Court rulings on education spending. He says more money for public schools isn't the answer, but rather smarter spending of state education dollars.
Instead of looking at the bottom line, let's look at what money is getting into the classroom. We need 75 cents of every dollar to get into the classroom, not the 50 cents right now.
The Secretary of State has become a nationally recognized figure thanks to 2 issues on illegal immigration and voter registration. Kobach vows to make both a priority in the governor's office.
Sanctuary cities and counties will end under my administration. We will stop giving $377 million in welfare and other public benefits to illegal aliens every year. And we will stop giving in-state tuition rates to illegal aliens when our own students can't afford to go to college.
Kobach's opponents criticize him on this issue, claiming the Kansas economy relies heavily on undocumented immigrant labor. For Kobach, the issue comes back to the financial burden placed on Kansans who abide by state and federal laws.
I know Democrats like to think it's the government's money, but it's our money. We earned it. And we need to stop spending so much so the people of Kansas can have that money in their pocket.
Other issues supported by the GOP nominee include the protection of gun rights, the creation of a direct primary care system for the poor and disabled rather than the expansion of Medicaid, and continued pursuit of a pro-life agenda. As with all the candidates, I encourage you to visit Kobach's campaign website, chriskobach.com. There you'll find a list of his policy positions. Next week, we'll wrap up our look at the Kansas gubernatorial candidate roster with a review of the independent in the race. Reporting for Great Plains Christian Radio, I'm Delvin Kinser. Throughout the history of the country, it's rare for an independent or third-party candidate to get enough traction to affect the outcome of an election. This week's From the Heartland feature shows us this year's gubernatorial race in the Sunflower State could be one of those exceptions.
We never settle for just 2 lousy choices in anything, except politics.
The election for Kansas governor is a 3-way race, with former Democrat and independent candidate Greg Orman making the argument that the 2 major parties aren't doing such a good job at the State House.
Kansas used to be a leader, a place that other states look to for inspiration. Now we're a cautionary tale, and both parties are to blame. Through the fog of partisan battles, we've lost sight of one really simple truth. This is about improving people's lives.
That's Orman's opening statement at the State Fair debate earlier this month. His message is designed to reach both Democrats and Republicans who cringe at the liberal-conservative divide. The Olathe, Kansas businessman qualified for the November ballot by gathering some 10,000 signatures from Kansas voters. He made a name for himself 4 years ago as a darling for Democrats when he took on Republican U.S. Senator Pat Roberts. Democrats now view him as a threat to their chances at reclaiming the Kansas governor's office, even though his plans stand in line with theirs on most issues, including immigration, which he says should be tough but fair.
By tough, I mean we need to secure our borders. Obviously, we need secure borders. But then it has to be practical. We're not going to find and deport 11 million people, nor would it be economically advisable. Western Kansas would be decimated economically if we did that. So how do we make it fair to taxpayers? I believe if you're here on an undocumented basis, you should have to register with ICE by a date certain. You should have to pay a small fine or perform community service as an acknowledgement that a law's been broken. But then, if you hold down a job, you pay your taxes, you obey our laws, you should be able to stay here and work.
Orman supports the expansion of Medicaid in Kansas, but wants to find an easier way for the poor and disabled to apply. He claims to understand the attitudes of Kansans who oppose abortion, but would oppose efforts to restrict it. And he agrees with a growing number of Americans that marijuana laws are too strict.
I don't think we should be wasting criminal justice resources, arresting, incarcerating, trying and jailing a kid for buying a dime bag of weed. So I think it should be a citable offense, a ticket the same way you would get a speeding ticket.
The Independent believes the Kansas economy is being left behind as the national economy appears to be soaring. He promises a businessman's approach to bringing jobs to all parts of Kansas.
I would do the same thing I would do in the private sector. First, say, how do we leverage our strengths? We're at the geographic center of the United States at a time when our economy is moving quickly from a bricks and mortar to a distributed economy. We should be the intermodal manufacturing capital of America. We should interconnect our power grid with Colorado so that we can ship our renewable and wind energy west. We should build better paths to technical education. I have a plan for giving a revolving loan fund for kids who want to pursue technical and career programs and a tax credit for public-private partnerships for career education.
Other policy positions include support for better state funding of Kansas public schools and opposition to the use of tax credits for parents who send their kids to private schools. He claims support for the Second Amendment, but wants Kansas to reinstate training requirements for concealed carry. You can find greater detail of all of Orman's plans by visiting his website at ormanforkansas.com. It's yet to be seen if Orman's challenge to the politics of the major parties will elevate him to Topeka. Political observers in both parties believe a vote for Orman means their rival party will win. That wraps up our look at the Kansas candidates for governor. No matter who you support for office in 2018, make sure your voice is heard at the ballot box. Exercise your privilege and vote. Reporting for Great Plains Christian Radio, I'm Delvin Kinser.